The Tempest floated in the shadow of the epoch, its sleek hull reflecting the distant stars like a forgotten relic in the vast emptiness of space. Commander Alyssa Rourke stood at the observation window, staring at the ghostly vessel. Her fingers grazed the cold surface of the glass, her mind racing as she tried to process the weight of what lay before her. The epoch had been missing for over a century, disappeared without a trace during an exploration mission into the unknown sectors of the galaxy. No one had expected to see it again. "Commander, we're ready to board," Lieutenant Elias Stone's voice crackled over the comm. His tone was tense, betraying a hint of unease. He was the ship's tactical officer, the one who always kept a cool head in the heat of battle. But this was something different. Alyssa turned, locking eyes with her second-in-command. "I know Elias. Let's get this over with." The crew of the Tempest had been briefed on the epoch's disappearance, but the sight of it in person, this derelict ghost ship, was something else entirely. It wasn't just a hunk of metal lost in the void. It was a piece of history, a symbol of humanity's ambitious reach into the stars. And now it was back. But the question lingered. Why? What had happened to it? And what was it trying to tell them? As the boarding team suited up and prepared for the airlock cycle, a shiver of anticipation and dread ran through Alyssa. She could feel the weight of her decision to lead this mission. The epoch had been lost in the farthest reaches of space, its crew and passengers never heard from again. There had been no sign of distress, no indication of failure. It had simply vanished. And now it had returned, but not without a cost. The doors of the epoch slowly slid open with a hiss, releasing a cloud of stale air that had lingered for over 100 years. The team stepped inside, their boots making soft thuds on the metal floor as they ventured into the darkness. The only sound was the hum of their suits and the faint crackle of their comms. Alyssa's heart thudded in her chest. Something was off, something she couldn't quite place. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. "Stay sharp," Alyssa whispered to her team. "We don't know what we're walking into." They moved deeper into the ship, the dim emergency lights flickering to life as they passed. It was eerily quiet, far too still for a ship that had once been home to hundreds of crew members. The walls, though aged, seemed well-maintained, too well-maintained, as though someone or something had been taking care of it. In the ship's central command hub, they found it. An old, cracked display screen flickered to life. Alyssa stepped forward cautiously, her heart racing as she read the message that appeared. "To whom it may concern, the Urak are coming. They will erase you. There is no escape." The words were chilling in their simplicity, and as the final syllables flickered away, a surge of static echoed through the room, followed by a strange, distorted voice. "Warning, final transmission. Escape." The voice sputtered, then went silent, replaced by a series of garbled noises. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Alyssa looked around at her crew. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with disbelief. No one said a word. The atmosphere had shifted. What had once been a mission of discovery was now a race against time. "That's it, isn't it?" Elias said, his voice barely audible over the comms. "Whatever this is, it's not just a warning. It's a death sentence." Alyssa took a deep breath, the weight of the message settling in. The Urak were coming. Whoever, or whatever, the Urak were, they were about to change everything. "We need to get back to the ship," she said, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "No." As they made their way back to the Tempest, the chilling thought that had begun to form in the back of Alyssa's mind solidified. Whatever was coming, Humanity was not prepared for it. The Tempest drifted silently in orbit around the epoch, its sleek hull bathed in the cold light of distant stars. The crew, still reeling from the message they had uncovered, gathered in the ship's briefing room. Commander Alyssa Rourke stood at the head of the table, her arms crossed, her brow furrowed as she reviewed the data. The words of the final transmission echoed in her mind. "The Urak are coming. They will erase you. There is no escape." The message had been cryptic, fragmented, but one thing was clear. They were in grave danger. "We need to analyze everything we have. The Urak are not a known threat. We don't even know what they are," Alyssa said, her voice firm. She turned toward Lieutenant Elias Stone, our tactical officer. "Elias, what do we know about their capabilities?" Elias scrolled through his console, his eyes narrowing. "Not much, Commander. The epoch's logs don't give us any clear data on them, but the little we've recovered points to a race of beings capable of eradicating entire civilizations. According to what we found, their method of conquest isn't just about war, it's annihilation. They wipe entire species from existence." He paused, his voice thick with unease. "And if the epoch's message is true, they've already come this way before." Alyssa felt a chill run down her spine. The epoch's crew had encountered the Urak, and it hadn't ended well. But why had the message been hidden? Why had the epoch been lost to begin with? There were too many unanswered questions, too many gaps in the story. "Can we track them? Any sign of where they are now?" Alyssa pressed. Elias shook his head. "We've already dispatched probes, but the outer regions of the galaxy are vast. If the Urak are already here, they're likely hidden in the void, striking from the shadows. No ships, no fleets, just total destruction." Lieutenant Juno Reyes, the ship's communications officer, spoke up. "I've been digging through the epoch's last known communications. There are mentions of isolated attacks on colonies, small, strategic strikes, followed by complete silence. It's as if they're taking out key systems and leaving no trace behind. No battles, no survivors. Just nothing." Alyssa stood, her jaw clenched. "Then we have to assume they've already infiltrated some of our colonies. If they're capable of hiding their presence and wiping out entire worlds without leaving a mark, they could be anywhere." The room fell into a heavy silence, the gravity of the situation settling over them like a thick fog. The Urak were not just conquerors. They were ghosts, silent, efficient, and utterly merciless. Humanity had never faced anything like this before. "Commander, we've received a transmission from Earth," Juno said, her voice cutting through the tension. "It's from the United Galactic Council." Alyssa turned sharply toward the comm station. The Council's message was brief and direct. "We acknowledge the Tempest's findings. Immediate coordination with all colonies is now underway. Prepare for full mobilization. Additional fleet reinforcements will be en route." Alyssa's eyes narrowed. Mobilization. Fleet reinforcements. For what? We don't even know what we're dealing with yet. "We're not the only ones who are scared," Elias murmured. "Earth's leadership is jumping to conclusions just like we are. They're treating this as an all-out war before we even know what kind of fight we're in." Alyssa's mind raced. The Urak were not just a new enemy. They were a force unlike any humanity had ever encountered. The epoch's crew had tried to warn them, but Earth was already too late. What if it was already too late for everyone? And what if the Urak had only just begun? "All right," Alyssa said, her voice taking on an edge of authority. "We're going to find out everything we can about the Urak. We'll track down every piece of data, every fragment of information we can get our hands on. We're not going to let Earth go to war with a ghost. The crew nodded in silent agreement, but Alyssa could see the unease in their eyes. They weren't just preparing for a fight. They were preparing for an enemy who might not even have a face. As the Tempest began its journey back to Earth, Alyssa couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The Urak were coming, and they weren't just a threat. They were the end of everything humanity knew. The Tempest had left the epoch behind, its dark silhouette fading into the distance as they ventured toward Earth. But Alyssa Rourke couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to her like a shadow. The Urak were still a mystery, but their methods, their intentions, were terrifyingly clear. The more they pieced together from the epoch's logs, the more it became apparent that the galaxy was not prepared for what was coming. As the ship hurtled through space, the crew worked tirelessly to decrypt the epoch's last transmission. But every time they thought they were close, more cryptic, broken data would appear, half images of desolate planets, reports of unexplained disappearances, all punctuated by the same chilling message: there is no escape. Alyssa paced the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes flickering between the star charts and the growing mass of intelligence. The dark void of space had always felt comforting to her, a place of solitude and mystery. But now it was suffocating. It felt as though someone, was watching them, waiting. "Elias, anything new from the probes?" she asked, breaking the silence. Elias Stone, still glued to his console, rubbed his eyes before responding. "Nothing solid, Commander. I've cross-referenced the epoch's data with every known hostile species in the galaxy. There's nothing like the Urak. Whatever they are, they don't fit into our usual patterns of contact." But he paused, his voice growing more tense. "There's something strange about their trajectory. If their fleet is coming, it's not in a pattern we recognize. It's almost like they're being guided by something outside the scope of known space." Alyssa's heart skipped a beat. Guided by something. The thought felt like an icy hand closing around her chest. Before she could respond, the ship's Athena interrupted the moment with a calm but urgent tone. "Commander, we are receiving an incoming transmission from Earth. It's marked as high priority." Alyssa's pulse quickened. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, and the familiar face of General Evander Hoke appeared. His expression was as grim as the message he delivered. "Commander Rourke, I hope this message finds you in one piece," Hoke began, his voice steady but filled with underlying tension. "The situation has escalated beyond anything we anticipated. We've detected unusual activity near the Terran colonies in the outer sectors, disappearances, anomalies in the comms networks, and several outposts going completely dark. We're not dealing with isolated attacks anymore. We're dealing with a galaxy-wide threat. The Urak have already made their move." Alyssa clenched her fists. She had known it was only a matter of time before the full scope of the threat would make itself known, but hearing it from Hawke, the leader of Earth's military, was a harsh reality. "Have you identified any survivors?" she asked, trying to mask the fear creeping into her voice. Hawke's face tightened. "No, Commander. We haven't received any reports from the colonies. The entire network has been wiped out. I'm ordering all available ships to converge on the colonies in the outer sectors, but it's going to take time. Earth can't afford to lose more ground." Alyssa took a deep breath. "We're on our way. Prepare for our arrival and coordinate with us. We need to know exactly what we're up against. I won't let Earth fall without a fight." Hawke nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I'm counting on you, Commander. The Urak don't give second chances." The transmission cut off, leaving Alyssa with a heavy weight on her shoulders. She turned toward her crew, their eyes filled with determination, but also fear. The battle for humanity's survival was no longer a distant thought. It was here, and it was coming fast. Elias, Juno, get the ship ready for warp. We're heading to the outer sectors, she ordered, and don't let up. We need to find out everything we can about these Urak before we reach Earth. If they've wiped out entire colonies without a trace, we need to know how they operate. Her crew nodded and sprang into action, each member moving with the efficiency of soldiers on a battlefield. Alyssa remained at the front, watching as her crew worked together, a mix of urgency and focus in every movement. As the Tempest prepared for its journey into the unknown, Alyssa couldn't shake the feeling that Earth's survival, perhaps even the survival of the entire galaxy, was hanging in the balance. And the only way to stop the Urak was to face them head-on, no matter the cost. In the vastness of space, where silence was usually the only sound, Alyssa knew the real battle was about to begin, and there would be no turning back. The Tempest powered through the darkness of space, its engines roaring as they entered warp speed. Alyssa Rourke stood at the command chair, her hands gripping the armrests tightly as the ship trembled slightly with the surge of acceleration. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light, but in her mind, everything was still. The calm before the storm. "ETA to the outer colonies?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension that gripped her. "Approximately 12 hours, Commander," Elias Stone replied from his station, his fingers dancing over the console. "I've been tracking the anomalies reported by Earth Command. No signs of Urak ships yet, but the disappearances, they're all centered around the same region." Alyssa nodded. The outer colonies were sparsely populated, isolated in the far reaches of human expansion. They had always been at the fringes, their isolation meant to protect them from the dangers of the more crowded systems. Now, it seemed, that distance had become their greatest vulnerability. If the Urak were already there, humanity would be one step closer to losing everything. "What kind of anomalies are we dealing with, Elias?" Alyssa asked, her voice laced with concern. Elias glanced up at her. "Communication blackouts, sudden power surges, and in one case, entire space stations going silent. The colonies haven't reported any hostile encounters, just nothing. As though the inhabitants vanished in the middle of their daily routines." Juno Reyes, the comms officer, chimed in from her station. "I've been going through the last messages sent from the colonies. They're all laced with confusion, fragments of distress signals. Some of the transmissions end abruptly, others are interrupted, but the pattern is the same, complete loss of contact within hours of a report." Alyssa's heart tightened. This wasn't just an attack, it was surgical, efficient, a whisper in the night. "We need to be prepared for the worst," she said, her gaze steady. "Whatever this is, it's not an isolated incident. The Urak are methodical, and they leave nothing behind." Alyssa's mind drifted to the epoch, to its doomed crew. They had sent a warning, but the message had been buried under centuries of silence. What if the Tempest was too late? What if Earth had already succumbed to whatever the Urak were capable of? She clenched her fists, pushing the thought away. They weren't too late, not yet. She had to believe that. The Tempest had the advantage of knowledge, and that was worth everything. "Prepare for deorbit. We'll be entering the colony sector soon," Alyssa ordered. As the ship began its descent into the gravity well of the nearest colony, the crew worked in synchrony, performing their tasks with practiced precision. The lights dimmed as the ship adjusted for re-entry, and the hum of the engines settled into a steady rhythm. Alyssa felt the familiar weight of the ship's descent press against her chest. Despite the chaos that loomed ahead, there was a strange sense of calm. She had led her crew through countless missions, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for territory or resources. This was humanity's survival. Suddenly, the alert system flashed, and a low mechanical voice filled the bridge. Unidentified vessel detected. Range 500 kilometers and closing. Alyssa's pulse quickened. They had not expected any Urak ships this soon. All hands, brace for impact, she ordered. Elias, Juno, identify that vessel. Elias's fingers flew over the console. I'm analyzing the trajectory. It's not a standard ship design, Commander. It's unlike anything we've seen before, elongated with sharp edges. It's definitely not human. Urak, Alyssa muttered under her breath, her stomach tightening. This was it, the first confrontation. The first sign that the Urak were not just an unknown threat. They were here, and they were making their move. Shields at full power, she commanded. Elias, open a comm channel. Elias hesitated for a moment. No response, Commander. The vessel is jamming all frequencies. Alyssa's eyes narrowed as she focused on the alien ship closing in on them. It was sleek, predatory in design, like a phantom, moving through the stars with eerie precision. There was no sign of a fleet, no indication of reinforcements. Just this one vessel, with its dark, ominous presence. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Alyssa barked. Juno, get me everything we have on their shields and weaponry. Elias, let's see if we can disrupt their jamming. The crew moved into action, but Alyssa couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach. This was no coincidence. The Urak were here, and they were testing humanity's defenses. And with each passing second, they were learning. The Tempest was humanity's last line of defense, but even Alyssa wasn't sure if it would be enough. The eerie silence of space was broken by the shrill sound of alarms as the unidentified Urak vessel drew closer. Alyssa's grip tightened around the command chair. Her crew worked feverishly, their movements sharp, precise. A dance they performed 1,000 times, but this time with the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on them. Shields are holding at 80%. Juno called out, her voice steady but with a hint of urgency. Their weaponry is unknown, but we're detecting energy buildup on their hull. They're preparing to fire. Alyssa's pulse quickened. She had hoped to learn more about the Urak before engaging, but the situation had escalated faster than they had anticipated. The alien vessel was unlike anything they had encountered before, sleek, angular, and far too advanced for any race that had ever been known to humanity. Juno, enhance our defensive systems, Alyssa commanded. Elias, try to disrupt their energy signatures. If we can't get a comm signal, we'll have to rely on our weapons. Understood, Commander. Elias responded quickly, fingers flying over his console. I'm bypassing the primary systems to route power to the disruptors. But if their jamming field is too strong, we may not be able to do anything. The tension on the bridge was palpable. They had no choice but to act. The unknown ship was mere moments from firing, and in the vacuum of space, even a single hit could be disastrous. Alyssa's mind raced as she weighed the options. If they didn't engage now, they'd be at the mercy of the Urak, whoever they were, and that was a fate she wasn't willing to accept. Prepare to return fire, Alyssa ordered, her voice sharp. Elias, I want our disruptors online in the next 30 seconds. Juno, keep those shields up, whatever it takes. As the alien vessel loomed closer, Alyssa could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The fate of the colonies, the fate of Earth, hinged on their ability to survive this encounter. If the Urak were truly as powerful as the epoch had indicated, their first attack could very well be their last. Humanity had no room for mistakes. Suddenly, the enemy ship fired. A brilliant, blinding beam of energy shot from its hull, streaking toward the Tempest. The impact rattled the ship, throwing the crew back in their seats, but the shields absorbed most of the blast. Sparks flew from consoles as the ship lurched, but they held steady. The damage was minor, but the warning was clear. The Urak had no intention of negotiating. Shields are down to 60%. Juno shouted, her fingers rapidly adjusting controls. They're recharging their weapon systems. Another shot incoming. Alyssa's instincts kicked in. Evasive maneuvers. Elias, I need those disruptors now. Take their weapons offline. Working on it, Commander. Elias grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. He was already diverting all available energy to the ship's weapon systems, but the alien ship's technological advantage was palpable. Each attempt to jam their systems was met with countermeasures that Elias couldn't fully overcome. Their technological gap was vast. We're not going to last much longer like this, Elias muttered under his breath. We need to get closer, close the distance. If we're within range, our weapons might have a chance at penetrating their shields. Alyssa's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. They were outgunned, outmatched. But they still had one advantage: speed. The Tempest was fast, and she wasn't going to let it get destroyed by some alien invader. Juno, set course to flank their starboard side, Alyssa ordered, her mind calculating their next move. We need to get within weapons range. Elias, I don't care if it's risky. We'll push everything we have into the disruptors. We need to take out their weapons now, or we'll be sitting ducks. Aye, Commander, Elias replied, already rerouting power from non-essential systems. I'm diverting all auxiliary power. If this doesn't work, we're going to lose our disruptors. The Tempest rocked again as another blast from the Urak ship slammed into their shields. This time, the Tempest veered off course slightly, but Alyssa kept her focus. Their only chance was to press forward, close the distance, take the fight to them. Evasive course plotted. Juno confirmed, her fingers moving in fluid motions. Hold on, Commander. This is going to be a rough one. Alyssa nodded grimly. Do it. With a violent lurch, the Tempest veered toward the alien ship's starboard flank, narrowly avoiding another blast. The enemy ship, seemingly unaware of the maneuver, continued to track their previous course. It was a gamble, but in the deadly game of space combat, it was the only move they had left. Disruptors charging, Elias shouted, firing in 3, 2, 1. The Tempest's disruptors fired a brilliant pulse of energy toward the Urak ship. The blast hit its shields with a crackling explosion, but this time the alien ship shuddered, its energy pulse flickering for a moment before stabilizing. They'd done something. The enemy vessel's weapon systems pulsed erratically. For the first time, Alyssa felt a glimmer of hope. That's it, Commander, Elias said, his voice filled with quiet triumph. We've got a breach in their systems. Alyssa's eyes locked onto the enemy ship, watching as it attempted to recover. Now, let's finish this. The Tempest surged forward, its hull vibrating with the raw power of its disruptors. The alien vessel, a terrifying enigma of alien technology, wavered under the pressure. Alyssa's breath came in shallow bursts as she watched the readouts closely, heart pounding in her chest. The battle was far from won, but for the first time, the scales seemed to tip in humanity's favor. Elias, we've got a breach in their systems, Alyssa asked, her voice tight with anticipation. "Yes, Commander," Elias confirmed, his hands moving rapidly across his console. "Their weapon systems are offline, and I'm detecting a power drain across their core. We've stunned them, but they're not out yet. Keep the pressure on them. Juno, get us closer. We need to end this now," Alyssa commanded, her voice firm as she focused on the screen displaying the alien ship. The damage was clear. Its weapons had fallen silent, but its shields were still holding strong. The Urak vessel might be down, but it wasn't out. The Tempest lurched again as another blast hit the shields, this time from an unexpected angle. The alien ship, despite its apparent weakness, was fighting back. Its sleek hull flared with a strange pulse of energy, an unstable discharge that sent a shockwave rippling through the fabric of space. "What the hell was that?" Juno exclaimed, her fingers flying over her controls to stabilize the ship. Alyssa's eyes narrowed. "They're adapting. Whatever's left of their systems is still dangerous. Don't let up." Elias's voice crackled over the comms, urgency rising in his tone. "Commander, we're not going to get another chance like this. If we don't finish them now, they'll find a way to reboot their systems. We've got less than 3 minutes before their secondary cores are online." The pressure weighed heavily on Alyssa's shoulders. She looked around the bridge, meeting the eyes of her crew. The resolve in their faces mirrored her own. They'd come too far to back down now. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for humanity's future. "Juno, take us in. We're going for the core," Alyssa said, her mind racing through their options. "Elias, prepare the railguns. If their shields are still up, we'll need the penetration power." Juno nodded without hesitation, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Aye, Commander," taking us in full speed. The Tempest lunged forward again, this time with a renewed surge of energy. The alien vessel, though damaged, still had the speed to evade. Its jagged form twisted and spun as if trying to retreat, but there was nowhere left to run. The stars outside seemed to stretch and warp as the two ships locked in a deadly dance. The Tempest closed the distance, its engines roaring as it surged toward the Urak ship's exposed flank. Alyssa held her breath, her fingers gripping the armrests of her chair as Elias prepared the final assault. Charging railguns, Elias announced, his voice steady but tinged with the tension that gripped them all. "Firing in 5 seconds." The seconds seemed to stretch into eternity as the Tempest closed in on the alien vessel. Every movement, every calculation had to be perfect. There could be no second chances. "Shields at 40% and dropping," Juno reported, her voice calm but strained. "We're almost in range, Commander. Get ready. Fire." The command was barely out of her mouth when the Tempest's railguns fired in a single devastating salvo. The projectiles streaked across the void, their magnetic fields crackling with energy as they impacted the alien vessel's shields. The explosion of energy that followed was blinding, a cascade of light that briefly turned the darkness of space into a brilliant inferno. The Urak ship shuddered violently, its shields flaring with the impact. For a moment, it seemed as though the Tempest had missed, until the shields faltered, and the explosion tore through the alien vessel's hull. "Direct hit," Elias shouted. "We've breached their core." The Urak ship groaned in protest as its systems sparked and flared. A chaotic burst of energy ripped from its center, and for a moment, Alyssa feared the worst, an explosion large enough to take them both out. But instead, the ship simply stalled, its systems flickering into silence. "Status," Alyssa demanded, her voice a harsh whisper. "Captain," Juno said, her voice in awe. They're gone. The ship's core has collapsed. No more power readings. They've lost all life signs. It's over. Alyssa exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging with the weight of the battle. The alien ship was crippled, no longer a threat. But she knew they couldn't afford to relax just yet. The Urak were relentless, and this victory, though significant, was just one battle in a larger war. "Prepare to board," Alyssa said, her voice low but resolute. "We need to know what we're dealing with. If the Urak are this dangerous, we can't afford to wait for them to regroup." The crew went to work immediately, their movements swift as they prepared the boarding parties. Alyssa's mind raced ahead, her thoughts on the bigger picture. This was a victory, but only the first step in an unimaginable war that would change humanity's future forever. The Tempest drifted into the wake of the broken Urak vessel, its damaged but resilient hull casting a long shadow across the stars. Humanity had struck a blow, but would it be enough to turn the tide? Only time would tell. The Tempest hovered in the dead silence of space, its hull scared and groaning under the strain of battle. The Urak ship drifted like a broken shell, its systems dark and lifeless. There was no sign of movement, no more alien energy pulses, no more threats. Just the cold expanse of space, stretching endlessly in all directions. But Alyssa knew better than to let her guard down. This might have been their victory, but the war was far from over. The Urak were relentless, and their technology was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The next step was crucial, finding out what they had learned from this battle, and what kind of threat they were really up against. "Commander, we're ready to begin boarding operations." Elias's voice crackled through the comms. "I've got the team prepped and ready to move." Alyssa stood slowly, her muscles aching from the adrenaline that had coursed through her during the battle. She was exhausted, but there was no time to rest. Every moment counted. The Urak ship was vulnerable now, but who knew how long that would last? If they didn't seize the opportunity, they might not get another. "Understood, Elias," Alyssa replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. "Prepare for a direct entry. I want full scans before we make any moves. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with inside." "Copy that. Commander," Elias acknowledged, his tone shifting to something more serious. "We're making our way to the breach now." On the bridge, Alyssa paced back and forth, her eyes never leaving the holographic display of the enemy ship. The wreckage loomed in front of them like a haunting reminder of what had been destroyed, but it also held the key to humanity's survival or its destruction. If they were going to face the Urak again, they needed to understand their enemy. Juno, always cool under pressure, worked furiously at her console, pulling up a series of scans. "Commander, the ship's interior is intact. No immediate signs of hostile life, but I'm detecting a large concentration of unknown materials in the center core. It's as if they'd hidden something." Alyssa's gaze sharpened. A hidden weapon, or something worse. "We won't know until we get closer," Juno replied, her fingers flying over the console. "But it's unusual. The core's radiation levels are fluctuating. It's as if something is still active inside." "Keep me posted," Alyssa ordered. "We're boarding in 10 minutes." The doors to the command deck slid open, and Elias and his team marched in, clad in their tactical suits, their faces grim. "Commander, the team's ready," Elias said, his voice taut with anticipation. "We're heading in now. The airlock is secure, and we're scanning for any remaining life signs." Alyssa nodded and moved to the front of the team. "Stay sharp," she said, her tone hard. "We don't know what's inside that ship, and we're not leaving without answers." The group filed out of the bridge and into the airlock, the door sealing behind them with a hiss. As the pressure equalized, Alyssa's mind raced. Every step into the wrecked Urak vessel felt like stepping deeper into the unknown. She had no doubt that they would find something here, something that could turn the tide in humanity's favor or condemn them all to a future of darkness. The airlock door slid open with a mechanical groan, revealing the yawning blackness of the Urak ship's interior. The metallic walls were jagged, scarred by the same energy pulses that had torn through the outside. The silence was unnerving, thick with the oppressive weight of their situation. Alyssa signaled for her team to spread out, her pulse hammering in her ears. As they advanced, the shadows seemed to stretch, the corridors winding and narrow, their eerie stillness echoing in the quiet. Every step felt like a challenge, every creak of metal a reminder that this was no ordinary battlefield. They reached a central core of the Urak ship, the heart of its power, the place where the strange energy had emanated from. The room was vast, a cathedral of alien design, its surfaces covered in symbols and markings that no human eye had ever seen before. But despite the eerie beauty of the space, the air was thick with an undeniable sense of danger. Alyssa's boots echoed as she stepped into the center, her team fanning out to search for clues. There, in the middle of the room, stood a massive crystalline structure, its pulsing light somehow both mesmerizing and foreboding. It seemed to hum with life, its energy coursing through the room in a way that felt almost alive. Elias, ever the pragmatist, approached it cautiously. "This is it, Commander. This is what they'd been hiding." Alyssa approached the crystalline structure, feeling the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. It was beautiful in its alien complexity, but it was also a reminder that the Urak had power far beyond anything they had imagined. "What is it?" Alyssa asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm not sure," Elias replied, his hands running over the surface. "But I think this is what's been powering their weapons. It's like a—" Before he could finish, a pulse of energy erupted from the core, sending the team scrambling back. The crystal flickered, its light growing more intense. Alyssa's mind raced. "Get out of there," she shouted. But it was too late. The ship began to tremble, its systems sparking to life once again as the structure pulsed with terrifying intensity. The Urak ship was awakening. The danger was far from over. The tremor reverberated through the Urak ship like a heartbeat. The pulsing energy from the crystal intensified, its rhythmic flashes growing erratic, blindingly bright. Alyssa's heart raced as she instinctively reached for her sidearm, her breath shallow in the face of the alien menace. The Urak ship was coming back to life, and with it, so was the terrifying force that had nearly wiped out humanity. "Commander!" Elias shouted, his voice cracking with alarm. "We need to get out of here now. Whatever that thing is, it's about to overload." Alyssa's mind was moving faster than her feet, calculating their options with rapid precision. The ship was reactivating its core, its systems humming with purpose. The strange crystalline structure, now fully awake, was clearly central to the Urak's power. If they didn't stop it, the damage would be catastrophic. The pulse had already caused the room to tremble, the walls warping under the pressure of the energy being released. "Retreat to the airlock," Alyssa commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're not equipped to fight this thing head-on. Get to the Tempest and prepare for an emergency extraction." Her team didn't hesitate. Elias was already moving, leading the way as they bolted for the exit. But the ship wasn't going to make it easy. As they turned to leave, the crystalline structure flared again, sending out a pulse of energy so powerful it knocked them off their feet. Alyssa's body slammed into the ground, The air knocked from her lungs, but she scrambled to her feet, heart pounding. "Go, go," Elias barked, pulling her up as he shielded her from the next wave of energy. His hand shook slightly, but his focus never wavered. "Juno!" Alyssa shouted as they pushed through the dark corridors, fighting the ship's collapsing structure. "Can we get the Tempest into position for an immediate extraction?" "Yes, Commander," Juno responded through their comms, her voice calm despite the dire situation. "I've got the coordinates locked. Give me 1 minute, and we'll have a clear path to the ship." The sound of the crystal's pulse reverberated through the ship, each blast more intense than the last. The Urak ship was tearing itself apart, the energy destabilizing with every passing second. Alyssa's mind raced, pushing her team faster, urging them forward as the walls shook around them. They had no time to waste. "Get to the airlock. Move," Elias urged, glancing over his shoulder. "It's going critical." They reached the airlock, and Alyssa's hand flew to the control panel, her fingers shaking as she typed in the codes to initiate the emergency lock. The seconds felt like hours as the system hummed to life, the airlock doors slowly sealing behind them. But just as the door closed, the ground beneath them rumbled violently. A deafening sound filled the air as the crystal at the center of the Urak ship erupted, releasing a torrent of energy that seemed to tear apart the very fabric of space. Alyssa staggered, feeling the force of the blast press against her chest, but Juno's voice came through the comms, steady and strong. "Commander, we're in position. Get ready." With a final desperate push, the team sprinted toward the Tempest's airlock, their boots slamming against the floor in rhythm with the increasing tremors. The ship's engines roared to life as Juno executed the extraction maneuver. The Tempest's hull groaned, the stress of the maneuver almost too much, but it was enough. They were moving. The space around them distorted as the Urak ship's explosion sent shockwaves through the fabric of space. Just as they reached the outer docking bay, the Tempest's engines flared with power, pulling them free from the wreckage. "Clear," Juno reported as the ship's shields absorbed the last remnants of the shockwave. "We're out of the blast radius. The Urak ship is gone." Alyssa sank into her chair, her body exhausted but alive. She exhaled deeply, her chest still tight with the adrenaline of the escape. She glanced around at her team, each one of them battered but unbroken. The Tempest had made it out, and they had the answers they needed. "The Urak ship is gone," Elias said, his voice soft, filled with awe. "But that crystal, it wasn't just a weapon. It was a message." Alyssa nodded, her mind already processing the implications. "A message for us, Elias. A warning. They know we're coming, and they'll be ready. We've only just begun." The truth was clear. The battle for humanity's survival was far from over. The Urak had more power, more technology, and more resources at their disposal than anyone had ever imagined. The Tempest had survived, but there was no guarantee they would be so lucky the next time. "Prepare for the next phase," Alyssa ordered, her voice steady, but beneath it was a fire that burned brighter than ever. "This war is only just beginning, and we'll be ready." The Tempest drifted silently in the darkness of space, the stars stretching endlessly before them. Whatever lay ahead, Alyssa knew one thing: humanity would stand tall. They had fought against the impossible, and they had won. But the cost was high, and the next battle would be even greater.